Every file tells a story. Some end in fame, some end in silence, and some even end in redemption. What you're about to hear was never meant to be forgotten. This is The Dark Files. The following case contains information that may be considered sensitive or disturbing. Certain details have been verified through official record and testimony. Viewer discretion is advised. Before the laughter, before the sitcoms, before the world knew her as Gina, there was a little girl in Newark who could light up any room. Her voice was clear, her confidence unshakable. Everyone thought she was destined for something big. They were right. What no one saw was how early she learned to perform through pain, how long she'd have to hide it just to survive the spotlight. Tisha Michelle Campbell was born on October 13th, 1968, in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, but grew up in Newark, New Jersey, a city that would shape both her confidence and her creative instincts. Her parents, Mona Campbell and Clifton Campbell, were both educators and musicians. Her mother, Mona Campbell, taught vocal music and ran talent programs that encouraged children to use performance as a form of artistic expression. Her father, Clifton Campbell, worked as a factory worker, singer, and chess master. Together, they made music and creativity a part of their household routine. Tisha was one of 5 children in a blended household. With limited income but a strong family work ethic, the Campbells treated performance as both craft and responsibility. From a very young age, Tisha was enrolled in acting, dance, and singing lessons. She participated in every community talent showcase her parents could find. Family friends recall her as an expressive child, funny, assertive, and meticulous, even before grade school. By the time she was 6, Tisha had already appeared on television. She performed on the children's programs The Big Blue Marble and Kids Are People Too, both of which aired nationally in the mid-1970s. Those early bookings made Tisha one of the youngest Black performers working regularly on television. But behind the achievement was a reality few people saw. By the time she was 12, Tisha was traveling alone between Newark and New York City for auditions. Her mother's schedule made it difficult to get her there on time, so Tisha learned to navigate subways, rehearsal studios, and rejection on her own. It was the kind of responsibility that looks impressive on paper, but it also meant she was left to handle an adult world without adult protection. That early independence built her work ethic, but it also exposed her to dangers no child should ever face. At Newark's Arts High School, one of the first magnet schools in the country devoted entirely to the arts, she studied drama and music formally. The school's reputation for nurturing talent, its alumni include Sarah Vaughan and Michael B. Jordan, gave her structure and access to professional-level instruction. Teachers later described her as exceptionally driven. She rarely missed rehearsal, and she balanced coursework with auditions for commercials and stage work around the tri-state area. By her mid-teens, Tisha was already a seasoned performer. She appeared in children's showcases and local theater productions, slowly building a resume before she ever reached Hollywood. Her training at Newark's Arts High School, balancing rehearsals with academics, and learning how to treat every stage, no matter how small, as preparation for something bigger, showed her discipline and precision beyond her age, traits that came from experience rather than privilege. She had the technical polish of a trained singer and the comedic timing of a natural entertainer, a combination that made her stand out at a time when few young Black actresses were being prepared for crossover television careers. Those years in Newark built the foundation that would carry her through Hollywood. The discipline of rehearsing daily, the experience of managing rejection early, and the creative partnership of her parents gave her the stamina to transition from a talented neighborhood kid into a working professional before she was out of high school. After finishing her studies at Newark's Arts High School, Tisha Campbell stepped into professional show business, already carrying years of experience. Her first major film appearance came at 17 when she landed a small but memorable role in the 1986 musical Little Shop of Horrors. She played one of the three doo-wop chorus girls, Crystal, Ronette, and Chiffon, the narrators who moved the story along through song. Tisha played alongside fellow teen actress Tichina Arnold. The two had met years earlier, around ages 10 and 11, while running the same New York audition circuit. The two young actresses bonded instantly. They saw each other so often that friendship became inevitable. Two kids chasing the same dream, surviving the same rejections. Little Shop of Horrors was the first time their professional paths officially crossed on screen, and they would go on to share the screen and stage several times in the decades that followed. That film role opened doors in both acting and music. Tisha began auditioning for television pilots and commercials, eventually finding regular work in Los Angeles. In 1987, she joined the cast of Rags to Riches, an NBC musical comedy series set in the 1960s, where she played one of 6 orphaned girls adopted by a wealthy bachelor. Although the show lasted only 2 seasons, it proved she could handle television pacing, learning lines, choreography, and music cues within a tight weekly schedule. In 1988, Tisha caught the attention of filmmaker Spike Lee, who cast her as Jane Toussaint in School Days. The film, set on a fictional HBCU campus, tackled colorism, class divisions, and identity within Black culture. Campbell's character embodied the poised, light-skinned, gamma-ray sorority archetype, and her performance, especially in the musical number Good and Bad Hair, showcased both her comedic rhythm and her vocal range. School Days became a cult classic and a turning point for many of its cast members, including Lawrence Fishburne, Giancarlo Esposito, and Jasmine Guy. For Tisha, it marked her graduation from teen roles into serious adult work. Her breakout, however, came 2 years later in 1990 in the cult classic movie House Party. The low-budget film, directed by Reginald Hudlin and produced by New Line Cinema, paired her with A.J. Johnson and introduced audiences to the rap duo Kid in Play. Tisha played Sydney, the witty, confident love interest whose grounded energy balanced the movie's comic chaos. The chemistry between her and her co-stars turned House Party into an unexpected box office success and a cultural milestone for early 90s Black cinema. The film's success led to House Party 2 and House Party 3, solidifying Tisha's position as one of the defining young actresses of her era. By the early 1990s, Tisha Campbell had already become a recognizable face in Black television and film. She had the musical ability, comedic instincts, and screen presence that made her a natural fit for sitcoms. In 1992, Tisha signed on for what would become her most recognized role of her career. She was cast as Gina Waters on Martin, the hit Fox sitcom created by Martin Lawrence and Topper Carew. The show centered on a Detroit radio host and his girlfriend, capturing a new kind of Black couple rarely shown on television, funny, ambitious, and emotionally connected. The chemistry between Campbell and Lawrence became one of the show's defining strengths and elements, and her performance as Gina gave viewers a rare image of a confident, career-minded Black woman in a loving, humorous relationship. During that same period, Campbell also pursued her long-standing passion for music. In 1993, she released her debut album, Tisha, under Capital EMI Records, featuring singles like Push and Love Me Down. The project blended pop and R&B with early 90s dance grooves, a sound similar to early Janet Jackson. Selling only about 40,000 copies, although it didn't achieve major commercial success, the album demonstrated her range beyond acting and her willingness to carve out space in a competitive early 90s music scene and step outside television to express herself creatively. But this perceived flop did not slow down or stifle Tisha's career in any kind of way, because the Martin show had become a cultural phenomenon. Martin was a major success, drawing millions of viewers weekly and ranking among Fox's highest-rated shows. Campbell received NAACP Image Award nominations for her performance and helped shape what many fans still consider the blueprint for 90s black sitcom couples. At this point, she was not just an actress but a cultural fixture, representing both aspirational love and independent womanhood on television. The show's success also extended her reach across Hollywood. She appeared in guest spots on other hit series, performed live at awards shows, and became a staple of 1990s black pop culture alongside her co-stars Tichina Arnold, Carl Payne, and Thomas Michael Ford. By 1995, Tisha Campbell was at her professional peak. Successful film franchise, acclaimed TV role, respected vocal talent, and a reputation for discipline and comedic timing. What audiences didn't see was the mounting tension behind the scenes of Martin, a situation that would soon change the course of her career and personal life. By 1996, Martin had become one of the most successful sitcoms on television. The chemistry between Martin Lawrence and Tisha Campbell was so believable that fans often blurred the line between their on-screen romance and real life. But behind the scenes, tensions were mounting. That same year, Tisha had married her longtime boyfriend, actor Dwayne Martin. As a newlywed, she grew increasingly uncomfortable with scenes that required intimate physical contact. According to her later lawsuit, filed in 1997 against Martin Lawrence and the show's production companies, she endured repeated harassment and inappropriate behavior that created what she described as a hostile work environment. The lawsuit detailed alleged verbal abuse and incidents of unwanted physical contact, both on and off camera, including moments where she alleged Martin tried to kiss her during filming despite her objections. When she first brought her concerns to production, she said they were brushed aside. As the situation escalated, Campbell decided to stop filming during the show's fifth and final season. Her absence shocked fans and ignited speculation in the press, but at the time, she offered no public explanation. Martin continued production using stand-ins, rewrites, and split-screen editing so that the two leads never had to share a scene. The lawsuit was settled out of court in April 1997 under undisclosed terms. The show ended that same year. Publicly, both sides expressed a desire to move on, but the damage was already done. Martin Lawrence gave interviews suggesting that Campbell's claims were financially motivated, that she had demanded a higher salary before filing the suit. Campbell, meanwhile, maintained her silence about the details of the settlement, only later clarifying that her decision to walk away was about boundaries, not money. In the aftermath, public opinion was divided. Many fans, protective of the show's legacy, turned their frustration toward Tisha, accusing her of ruining Martin or trying to bring down a black man. It was a reflection of the times when conversations about workplace harassment, consent, and power dynamics were rarely met with empathy, especially toward women of color. Industry response was quieter but noticeable. Casting slowed, and Campbell appeared in fewer leading roles immediately after the controversy. Whether that was the result of blacklisting or simple public fatigue, it marked a turning point. For years, it seemed as if one of television's most familiar faces had vanished from the spotlight. Martin Lawrence, for his part, later spoke publicly about the conflict, expressing regret for how things unfolded and emphasizing that he wished her well. Years later, Campbell herself echoed a similar sentiment. In multiple interviews during the 2000s, she said both had grown and healed, and she no longer carried resentment. They even reunited publicly on Martin. The reunion in 2022, where the cast celebrated the show's legacy and addressed the rift with maturity and humor. But while the reconciliation offered closure to fans, the events around Martin left a lasting mark on Campbell's career. The tension in the lawsuit had isolated her professionally, and the industry scrutiny compounded her already heavy emotional history. The trauma from the set had stirred memories she had kept buried since childhood, memories she would later speak about openly for the first time. When Martin officially ended, many people started to ask the same question. Why would Tisha Campbell walk away from Martin, one of the biggest roles of her career? Could things really have been that bad behind the scenes? What most don't know is that for Tisha, they were that bad. Not just professionally, but mentally and emotionally. The experiences on that set were triggering something much deeper. Memories for her that she'd spent a lifetime trying to suppress. What most people didn't know was that when Tisha Campbell was only 3 years old, she endured one of the most devastating things that can happen to a child. Here's what she was hiding.
The first time that I've admitted this on camera in front of millions of national people is that I too have been a victim of the same thing. When I was 3, I was raped. So it was a babysitter, somebody very close to us. He was watching me and my brothers. And I remember us watching TV, and I was a yeller. I can't remember which brother had a butter knife, but to me it was a knife. And I said, "Put that knife down." And the babysitter said, "I told you if you yell one more time, you're gonna get it." So I thought I was getting a spanking. He said, "Get in the room." And I remember it being really dark. And I remember him saying, "Lay down and take your clothes off." And he left the room for a second. And I was so scared, I was shaking. And I remember him bringing back Crisco. I can't smell Crisco to this day. It makes me sick to my stomach, the shortening. And I remember him using it on himself. I remember the smell of it. I can't stand it. So I remember it wasn't, I was too small in the front. And so he turned me over. And I remember my spirit escaping my body and hovering over and watching what was happening. And I felt myself hurl myself into a corner and ball up. And I think I blacked out because the next thing I remember was the pain, and I was back in my body, if that makes sense. And I remember limping out of the room and being really, really, really quiet. And my brothers were acting up, and usually I would be handling them or helping to handle them, and I just didn't. I just watched TV, and I remember feeling really numb, not physically, but numb spiritually. The next morning, I was still kind of limping. And I remember my dad saying, "What's wrong with you? Why are you limping like that?" And I said the babysitter's name, and I said he put his thing inside me. And I knew that. I was like, he'll handle it. My dad will handle it. My mom was a little bit more passive at the time. And she was young, you know? At that time, I think my mom was 18, 19. And I remember him yelling and screaming at my mom, and my mom shaking. And then they gathered the whole family. And I remember going from family member to family member, "Tell me what happened, tell me what happened, tell me what happened." But I think the worst part of it was nothing ever happened no consequences ever happened to him. So I grew up thinking nothing bad happens to bad people.
For decades, Tisha carried that pain quietly. She learned to perform through it, to smile, to work, to survive. But when she was confronted with unwanted advances and physical boundary violations as an adult, it unearthed every buried feeling she had tried to lock away. When she eventually spoke publicly about her assault decades later, it wasn't a revelation for attention, it was an act of reclamation. Her silence had protected others for years. Her voice would finally protect herself and help advocate for others. In doing so, Tisha reframed how audiences saw her, not as the woman who ruined a show, but as someone who refused to be broken twice. This openness gave her pain a purpose, but it also reframed her public image. Audiences who had only known Gina from Martin began to see a woman who had endured, fought back, and chosen transparency over secrecy. It was a turning point, not just in her personal life, but in how she used her platform moving forward. After Martin ended in 1997, Tisha Campbell found herself in an uncertain position. She was a recognizable face, but not a sought-after one. Hollywood can be quick to move on, especially from women who speak up, and the stigma attached to her lawsuit followed her quietly for years. She continued to audition, but the calls were fewer. Offers were smaller, and many roles didn't reflect the comedic and dramatic range she had already proven. Still, she refused to disappear. She worked in independent films, guest appearances, and voice roles, staying close to the craft even when the spotlight dimmed. Her major reintroduction came in the early 2000s through My Wife and Kids, a sitcom created by Don Rio and Damon Wayans. The series centered on an upper-middle-class black family, with Wayans as patriarch Michael Kyle and Tisha as his wife, Jay. The pairing, however, almost didn't happen. Campbell later revealed that Damon Wayans initially didn't want her for the role. The two had known each other for years, and Tisha was great friends with the whole family, but he had doubts about whether their chemistry would translate into the kind of easy comedic marriage the show needed. Tisha didn't take the rejection quietly. She pushed to audition anyway, literally sneaking in and forcing her way into the audition, knowing very well that Damon did not want her there, but never one to give up. When she walked into the room, her performance shifted the entire tone of the scene. The rapport was instant, and by the time the test ended, Damon and the producers knew she was the right choice. The show premiered in March 2001 and became a hit for ABC. Viewers connected with its blend of humor and family-centered storytelling, and Tisha's comedic timing once again shone. As Jay Kyle, she balanced warmth, wit, and authority, something audiences had missed since her Martin days. The series ran for 5 seasons, earning multiple NAACP Image Awards and solidifying her second act as a television mainstay. During the height of My Wife and Kids, Campbell became a mother herself. She and her husband, actor Dwayne Martin, welcomed 2 sons, but even this joyful chapter carried painful echoes of her past. In a later interview, Campbell explained that her childhood molestation affected her ability to breastfeed her first child. She said she felt an overwhelming fear that nursing him would somehow hurt him, as if the act itself were wrong. The physical closeness triggered old emotions she didn't fully understand at the time. Her pediatrician eventually told her to stop trying, explaining that her anxiety was so strong the baby could sense it. After going through therapy to understand why she was feeling this way, Tisha later said it became easier when she had her second child because she finally recognized what those feelings were. The lingering effects of early abuse surfacing in an unexpected, intimate moment. It was one of the rare times she spoke openly about how trauma doesn't disappear. Simply because life moves forward, it finds new ways to reveal itself. And just when Tisha would overcome one thing, life would continue to find new hardships to bring her way. When Tisha finally settled into motherhood, life brought another test. Her first son, Zen, was diagnosed with autism at just 18 months old. She's spoken about how that moment changed everything, how she had to relearn what strength, patience, and love really meant. Tisha poured herself into helping him thrive, becoming a fierce advocate for early intervention and awareness. In 2011, Tisha co-founded Colored My Mind, a nonprofit created to raise awareness about childhood autism in communities of color. The organization was born out of her personal experience with her son Zen's diagnosis and was started alongside other actresses whose children were also on the spectrum. Their goal was simple but urgent: to make sure families who look like theirs had access to information, resources, and support that were often missing in Black and brown communities. At the same time, more hardships would arise when her marriage to Dwayne Martin, once seen as one of Hollywood's solid Black power couples, began showing cracks. Over the years, there were whispers about financial strain and control issues. In 2016, the couple filed for bankruptcy, citing millions in debt, including unpaid taxes and real estate losses. Public records and court filings painted a picture of mounting stress behind the scenes of their seemingly perfect partnership. Then, when Tisha filed for divorce in 2018, after more than 20 years of marriage, she did so with a candid statement. She was ready to reclaim her peace. Later, she publicly stated that she had endured years of emotional and physical abuse, describing how she had been out of that relationship for a long time before people knew. She emphasized that healing and safety, for herself and her children, were her priorities moving forward. Professionally, she continued to work steadily. After My Wife and Kids, she appeared in sitcoms such as Rita Rocks, Dr. Ken, Outmatched, and later Uncoupled. These roles showcased her adaptability, able to carry both comedy and dramatic moments with equal ease. She also reunited with Tichina Arnold for several hosting projects and live performances, proving that her long-standing friendship remained one of the constants in her life. Through these years, Campbell also began to use her platform to speak openly about recovery, not just from trauma or divorce, but from silence itself. She talked about how survival doesn't mean pretending everything is fine. It means acknowledging the truth and still choosing to show up. She began releasing music again, this time on her own terms. By the late 2000s, Tisha Campbell had survived nearly every type of public and private storm imaginable: child stardom, exploitation, workplace trauma, industry backlash, divorce, and financial ruin. But instead of retreating, she did what she'd always done. She turned it into art. In 2018, she released the song I'm Still Here. The title itself was layered, part defiance, part testimony, and part wordplay. It was a declaration that she was still here, unbroken, yet also a nod to her inner strength like steel. The song was written as a personal letter to the man who raped her when she was 3 years old, a man who decades later reached out to ask for forgiveness. Rather than respond privately, Campbell answered him through her craft. In interviews, she explained that the song wasn't about excusing what he did. It was about reclaiming her own narrative, basically saying, "Forgiveness is for me. It means you don't get to control my story anymore." The track was a mix of pain and empowerment, not polished for radio, but raw in tone and delivery. It represented closure on her terms. For Tisha, it wasn't about reliving trauma. It was about transforming it. This act of creation came at a time when many were rediscovering her, not as Gina from Martin or Jay from My Wife and Kids, but as a whole woman, mother, survivor, and artist. She began performing more, reuniting with longtime collaborators like friend Tichina Arnold and even Martin. Tisha also became a vocal supporter of women navigating recovery from abuse, speaking candidly about therapy, boundaries, and self-acceptance. Her candor set her apart from the carefully curated image of the average celebrity. She spoke like someone who had done the work, messy, ongoing, but real. By the 2020s, Tisha had reclaimed her space in the industry, not as someone chasing relevance, but as someone rooted in purpose. Her later roles in Outmatched and Uncoupled introduced her to a new generation of viewers, while older fans saw her as a symbol of survival, a woman who had lived through Hollywood's full cycle and still found light in it. When asked about forgiveness and her song, she said she no longer carried hatred for the people who hurt her, whether from her past, her marriage, or her career. But she made one thing clear: forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It meant she refused to let those experiences define her or victimize her. Today, Tisha Campbell stands as one of the few child stars who endured decades of turbulence and came out standing tall. From her beginnings in Newark's arts programs to becoming a sitcom icon, her journey is not defined by tragedy, but by transformation. Her story reveals what survival actually looks like. Not perfection, but persistence. Not silence, but expression. Tisha Campbell didn't just survive her past, she forged it into something that could help others survive theirs, and became a legend in the process. So lurkers, you've seen the file. Now it's your turn to investigate. Do you think Tisha Campbell paid the price for speaking up through the traumas, the backlash, and everything she's survived? What do you believe was the real cost of telling her truth? And why do you think so many people stay silent instead? Drop your thoughts below. Your theories might just open the next case.